My name is Jules Townsend, and in the high-stakes ecosystem of my family, I was considered a product with zero market fit. 2 weeks ago, I stood on a sleek glass and steel graduation stage in front of 3,000 investors, industry leaders, and families, the air vibrating with the hum of high-bandwidth ambition. My parents, the same people who calculatedly refused to pay for my education because I wasn't a scalable asset, sat in the front row. Caleb, checking his smart ring for real-time market updates, and Becca, radiating a biohacked glow, sat with their faces drained of all color, like a system crash in progress. They came to watch my twin sister, Sienna, graduate. They had no idea I was even there. They certainly didn't expect the bug in their system to be the one keynote speaker for the Whittier Tech class of 2025. They definitely didn't know I'd be the one delivering the commencement address to the next generation of Silicon Valley elite. But this story doesn't begin with this high-profile launch. It begins 4 years earlier, in the minimalist, open-concept living room of our Palo Alto home, when my father looked me straight in the eyes and effectively terminated my funding. Before I continue, I want you to think about your own source code. If you've ever been the one working in the background while someone else took the Series A funding, this is for you. Please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy this story. And let me know in the comments what your local time is and what you're working on. Now, let me take you back to that oppressive summer evening in 2021. The acceptance letters arrived on the same sweltering, 95-degree Tuesday afternoon in April. Sienna got into Whittier Tech, a world-renowned incubator of billionaires, with a price tag of $65,000 a year. I got into Hudson State, a solid public university, $25,000 annually. Still expensive, but manageable for a father who just exited his last startup for 9 figures. That evening, Caleb, settling into his ergonomic workstation chair like a VC reviewing a failing pitch, called a family meeting. "We need to discuss the strategic allocation of the Townsend Educational Fund," he said, his voice as cold and precise as a line of code. Becca sat on the low-profile couch, holding a glass of green juice, her focus entirely on her breathing exercises. Sienna stood by the window, already looking like a tech lifestyle influencer in her designer athleisure. I sat across from Caleb, still clutching my acceptance letter, like a white paper for a project I truly believed in. "Sienna," Caleb began, his tone shifting to the one he used for high-value prospects. "We'll cover your full tuition at Whittier. Room, board, the networking retreats, the summer internships in Seoul. Everything." "Ah!" Sienna squealed, a sound of pure, venture-backed privilege. Becca smiled that serene, expensive smile. Then Caleb turned to me, his gaze narrowing into a high-resolution scan of my worth. "Jules, we've decided not to fund your education." The words didn't register at first. The room felt like it had suddenly lost all connectivity. "I'm sorry?" I whispered. "Sienna has mass market appeal," he continued, leaning into the glow of the smart home lighting. "She networks with the right stakeholders. She's built a personal brand that will open doors. Investing in her is a safe bet for the family's long-term legacy." He paused, and the silence that followed felt like a 404 error. And what came next felt like a system-wide failure. "You're smart, Jules, but you're not a disruptor. There's no ROI, no return on investment with you. You're functional, but you don't scale." I looked at Becca. She wouldn't meet my eyes, instead adjusting her smartwatch with a look of deep concentration. I looked at Sienna. She was already texting someone, her thumbs flying across her screen as she shared the update on her Whittier funding. "So I just bootstrapping my way through?" I asked, my voice trembling. Caleb shrugged, dismissing my entire future like a low-priority notification. "You're resourceful. You'll manage. Consider it a lean startup approach to your adulthood." That night, I didn't cry. Crying was a low-efficiency use of resources. I'd cried enough over the years. Over the missed birthdays when Caleb was at a board meeting in Davos. Over the hand-me-down tablets that were 2 generations behind Sienna's, and being clumsily cropped out of family photos posted to Becca's high-traffic social feeds. Instead, I sat in my room, staring at the flickering LED strip on my desk, and realized something that changed everything. To my parents, I wasn't their daughter. I was a low-performing prototype, a bad investment they wanted to pivot away from. But what Caleb didn't know, what nobody in this optimization-obsessed family knew, was that his decision would alter the course of my entire life. And 4 years later, he'd face the consequences in front of the very tech titans he spent his life trying to impress. The thing is, this wasn't new. The favoritism had always been there, woven into the fabric of our family like an ugly pattern everyone pretended not to see. When we turned 16, Sienna got a brand new matte black Tesla Model S with a red bow on top. I got her old laptop, the one with a cracked screen, a failing GPU, and a battery that lasted exactly 40 minutes if you didn't run anything more demanding than a text editor. "We can't afford 2 high-performance vehicles while maintaining our burn rate," Becca had said apologetically, while ordering another round of private yoga sessions. But they could afford Sienna's ski trips to Switzerland, her custom-designed prom dress, and her summer innovation tour through Japan. Family vacations were the worst. Sienna always got her own hotel room with a panoramic view of the bay. I slept on pull-out couches in hallways, or once, in a literal server room that the resort ironically called a high-tech sanctuary. In every family photo, Sienna stood center frame, radiating the glow of a successful launch. I was always at the edge, sometimes partially cut off like an afterthought, a blurred pixel in the background of their high-fidelity life. When I finally asked Becca about it, I was 17, desperate for a shred of validation in their algorithm. She just sighed. "Sweetheart, you're imagining things. We love you both the same." But the data points, the bank statements and the social feeds, didn't lie. A few months before the college decision, I found Becca's phone unlocked on the kitchen counter, next to her biohacking supplement tray. A text thread with Aunt Linda was open. I shouldn't have read it, but I did. "Poor Jules," Becca had written. "But Caleb's right. She doesn't have the unicorn potential. She's too quiet. We have to be practical with our capital allocation." I put the phone down, the cold quartz of the kitchen island feeling like a slab of ice. I walked away. That night, I made a decision I told no one about. Not because I wanted revenge, at least not in the traditional sense, but because I wanted to prove something to myself. I opened my laptop, the cracked one with the dying battery, and typed into the search bar, "Full ride fellowships for high IQ independent students." The results loaded slowly. Each millisecond felt like a lifetime. But what I found would change everything. I did the math at 2 a.m, sitting on the floor of my room with a mechanical keyboard and a legal pad. Hudson State, $25,000 per year. 4 years, $100,000. Parents' contribution? 0. My savings from 3 years of side hustling as a freelance coder? $2,300. The gap was staggering, a logic gate I had to pass through without their help. If I couldn't close it, I had three options: drop out, take on a crushing mountain of student debt, or go part-time, stretching a degree into a decade while working entry-level QA jobs. Every path led to the same place, becoming exactly what my father said I was. The failure, the bad investment, the twin who didn't have the it factor. I could already hear the family conversations at Thanksgiving 5 years down the line. Sienna is doing so well at her venture firm. Jules. Oh, she's still debugging her life at the local tech support desk. But this wasn't just about proving them wrong. It was about proving myself right. I scrolled through scholarship databases until my eyes burned and the morning sun hit the Palo Alto skyline. Most required recommendations, visionary essays, and proof of financial need. Some were scams. Others had deadlines that had already passed. Then I found something. Hudson State had a merit scholarship program for high-achieving, independent students. Full tuition coverage, plus a living stipend. The catch? Only 5 students per year were selected from a global pool of applicants. The competition was brutal. I saved the link. Then I kept scrolling. And that's when I first saw the name that would eventually change my life. The Whitfield Fellowship. A full ride, $10,000 annually for living expenses, awarded to only 20 students nationwide who showed disruptive potential. I laughed out loud in the dark of my room. 20 students in the entire country. What chance did I have? I was a girl whose own father wouldn't even lead a seed round for her education. But I bookmarked it anyway. I had 2 choices: accept the life my parents designed for me, or design my own operating system. I chose the second, but to do that, I needed a plan, and I needed it immediately. I spent the rest of that summer filling an entire notebook with the cold, hard logic of my own disruption. Every page of my notebook that summer was a data-driven roadmap for my own survival. Every margin was covered in contingency plans for a hardware-level life reboot my parents didn't think I could execute. Job number 1. Night shift QA tester for CloudSync, a Series B startup. Shift, 11 p.m. to 4 a.m. Estimated monthly income, $800. Job number 2. Hardware technician for the campus computer labs, weekends only, $400 a month. Job number 3. Teaching assistant for the data structures and algorithms department. If I could land it, another $300. Total, $1,500 per month, roughly $18,000 a year. Still $7,000 short of tuition, even with the Hudson State Merit Grant. That gap would have to come from scholarships, merit-based ones, the kind you earn, not the kind you're handed because your father sits on the board. I found the cheapest housing option within biking distance of the Palo Alto campus, a tiny, cramped bunk in a hacker house shared with 6 other aspiring devs. $300 a month, high-speed fiber included. No AC, no privacy, and the kitchen smelled like stale soylent and desperation. It would have to do. My schedule was hard-coded into something brutal but precise. 5 a.m., work at the startup, the blue light of the monitor searing my retinas. 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., classes, pushing my cognitive limits on cold brew and pure defiance. 6 p.m. to 10 p.m., study, work, or TA duties in the server basement. Sleep, 11 p.m. to 4 a.m., 4 to 5 hours a night for 4 years. That was the architecture of my existence. The week before I left for college, Sienna posted photos from her extravagant Cancun trip with friends. Sunset beaches, designer margaritas, and effortless laughter. I was packing my thrift store comforter into a secondhand suitcase I'd found in a dumpster behind a tech firm. Our lives were already diverging, and we hadn't even started yet. But here's what kept me going. Every night before sleep, I'd whisper the same thing to myself. This is the cost of my own IPO. Freedom from their expectations. Freedom from their unrelenting judgment. Freedom from needing their hollow approval. I didn't know then how right I'd be. And I didn't know that somewhere on the Hudson State campus, there was a professor who would see the raw source code in me that my own parents never could. Freshman year Thanksgiving arrived like a server timeout. I sat alone in my bunk, the laptop fan whirring uselessly against the November chill. Phone pressed to my ear, listening to the sounds of home. Laughter in the background, the clink of fine crystal, the warm chaos of a family gathering I wasn't part of. "Hello, Jules!" Becca's voice was distant, distracted by the high-end catering crew. "Hi, Mom. Happy Thanksgiving." "Oh, yes. Happy Thanksgiving, honey. How are you?" "I'm okay. Is Caleb there? Can I talk to him?" Then I heard his voice in the background, muffled, but clear enough to crash my system. "Tell her I'm debugging the entertainment system." The words landed like frozen stones. Becca's voice returned artificially bright. "Your father's just in the middle of something. Sienna was telling the funniest story about her Whittier Tech sorority." "It's fine, Mom." "Are you eating enough? Do you need anything?" I looked around my room, at the bulk-bought instant ramen on my desk, at the secondhand blanket with the frayed edges, at the textbook I'd borrowed from the library because I couldn't afford to buy it. "No, Mom, I don't need anything." "Okay, well, we love you." "Love you too." I hung up. Then I opened Instagram. The first thing in my feed was a photo Sienna had just posted. Caleb, Becca, and Sienna at the dining table. Candles lit, turkey gleaming. The caption: "So thankful for my amazing high-performance family. #Townsend Legacy." I zoomed in on the photo. 3 place settings. 3 chairs, not 4. The Townsend brand didn't have space for a legacy product that wasn't generating an immediate profit. I sat there for a long time, staring at that image, until my screen timed out. Something shifted inside me that night. The ache I'd carried for years, the longing for their approval, their attention, their love. It didn't disappear, but it changed. It hollowed out. And where the pain used to be, there was only a quiet, steel-cold emptiness. Strangely, that emptiness gave me something the pain never had. Clarity. Second semester freshman year, Advanced Algorithms 401. Dr. Aris was legendary at Hudson State. 30 years of teaching, published in every major journal, and a reputation for being as sharp as an encryption key. Students whispered that she hadn't given an A in 5 years. I sat in the 3rd row, took meticulous notes in my terminal, and turned in my first project, expecting a B- at best. The paper came back with 2 letters at the top: A+. Beneath the grade was a note in red ink: "See me after the lecture. This is non-negotiable." My heart dropped. I spent the entire lecture wondering if I'd accidentally hacked the grading system. After the lecture, I approached her desk. Dr. Aris was already packing her bag, silver hair pulled back in a severe bun, reading glasses perched on her nose like a hawk. "Jules Townsend." "Yes, ma'am." "Sit down." I sat. She looked at me over her glasses. "This code is one of the most elegant pieces of logic I've seen in 20 years. It's efficient, scalable, and absolutely lethal. Where did you study before this? Nowhere special, just a standard public high school, nothing advanced. And your family? Tech royalty? I hesitated, the old shame bubbling up for a second before I suppressed it. My family doesn't support my education, financially or otherwise. They don't think I have the bandwidth. The words came out before I could stop them. Dr. Eris set down her pen, her full attention finally locked onto me. Tell me more. So I did. For the first time, I told someone the whole story. The favoritism, the rejection, the 3 jobs, the 4 hours of sleep, the 3 chairs at the Thanksgiving table. All of it. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment, her gaze scanning me like she was reading a complex data set. Then, she said something that changed my trajectory forever. Have you heard of the Whitfield Fellowship? I nodded slowly. I've seen it, but it's impossible. 20 students nationwide. It's the unicorn of scholarships, Jules, she said. Full ride, living stipend, and the recipients at partner schools deliver the commencement address at graduation. It's not just a grant, it's a platform for massive disruption. She leaned forward, the fluorescent lights reflecting in her eyes. Jules, you have raw computational power, extraordinary potential. But potential means nothing if it's not deployed. Let me help you launch. Let's show them exactly what they refuse to fund. The next 2 years blurred into a relentless, high-intensity rhythm. Wake at 4 a.m., Hacker House by 5 o'clock, classes by 9 o'clock, library until midnight. Sleep, repeat. I missed every party, every Saturday football game, every late-night pizza run. While other students built memories, I built a GPA. 4.0. 6 semesters straight. There were moments I almost broke. Once, I fainted during a shift at the startup. Exhaustion, the doctor said. Dehydration and a lack of basic calories. I was back at work the next day because my AWS bills didn't care about my health. Another time I sat in my car, Zephyr's car actually, she'd lent it to me for a job interview, and cried for 20 minutes. Not because anything specific had happened, just because the sheer weight of being self-made was crushing my CPU. But I kept going. Junior year, Dr. Eris called me into her office. I'm nominating you for the Whitfield. I stared at her. You're serious? I don't joke about intellectual equity, Jules. 10 essays, 3 rounds of interviews. It'll be the hardest thing you've ever done. She paused, a rare ghost of a smile appearing. But you've already survived harder than a hostile takeover. The application consumed 3 months of my life, acting as a high-stakes stress test for my cognitive endurance. 10 essays, which I treated like white papers, about resilience, leadership, and a roadmap for a decentralized future. There were phone interviews with panels of unflinching professors, deep-dive background checks, and reference letters that Dr. Eris signed with the authority of a lead architect. Somewhere in the middle of it, Sienna texted me. It was the first time in months. Mom says you don't come home for the holidays anymore. That's kind of a low-bandwidth move, TBH. We're heading to a private tech retreat in Lake Tahoe. I read the message on my flickering monitor, my eyes bloodshot from a 48-hour coding sprint. The truth? I couldn't afford a plane ticket, and the gas for a drive across the state would have crashed my monthly budget. But even if I could, I wasn't sure I wanted to go. That Christmas, I sat alone in my Hacker House bunk with a cup of dehydrated instant noodles and a tiny paper Christmas tree Zephyr had made me out of recycled circuit boards. No family, no presents, No biohacking lectures from Becca. It was somehow the most peaceful holiday I'd ever had. The quiet hum of the server in the next room acting as a digital sanctuary. The email arrived at 6:47 a.m. on a chilly gray Tuesday in September of my senior year. Subject: Whitfield Foundation, final round notification. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely scroll the touchpad. Dear Miss Townsend, congratulations. Out of 200 national candidates, you have been selected as one of 50 finalists for the Whitfield Fellowship. The final round would consist of an in-person interview at our global headquarters in Midtown Manhattan. 50 finalists, 20 winners. I had a 40% chance if all things were equal. But growing up in the shadow of Caleb Townsend, I knew things were never equal. The interview was scheduled for a Friday in New York, nearly 3,000 miles away. I checked my bank account. $847. A last-minute flight would cost $400 minimum. A hotel would eat the rest, leaving me with zero runway for the next month's rent. I was about to close the laptop, accepting the planned obsolescence of my dreams, when Zephyr knocked on my door. "Jules, you look like you just lost your entire database without a backup." I showed her the email. She screamed, literally screamed, her voice echoing through the thin walls of the tech commune. "You're going," she said. "End of discussion, Zeph. I don't have the capital. Bus ticket is $53. It's a grueling cross-country haul, but it gets you to Port Authority. I'll lend you the money." "I can't ask you to." "You're not asking, I'm telling. Think of it as an angel investment in the most disruptive product I know." She grabbed my shoulders, her gaze as sharp as a laser. "Jules, this is your Series A. You don't get another one to prove Caleb's algorithm wrong." So, I took the bus. Dozens of hours overnight, crammed into a seat that smelled of stale coffee and industrial cleaner. I arrived in Manhattan at 5 a.m., with a stiff neck and a second-hand charcoal blazer I'd borrowed from a thrift shop in Oakland. The interview waiting room at the Whitfield Plaza was full of polished candidates. Young men in tailored Italian wool, girls carrying designer tech bags, with their parents hovering nearby like venture partners. They had an easy confidence, the kind that comes from having a trust fund as a failsafe. I looked down at my second-hand outfit, my scuffed shoes, but I'd tried to clean with a lens wipe in the station bathroom. I don't belong here, I thought. Then I remembered Dr. Eris's words. You don't need to belong. You need to show them you're the system upgrade they've been waiting for. 2 weeks after the interview, I was walking to my morning shift at CloudSync when my phone buzzed. Subject: Whitfield Fellowship decision. I stopped in the middle of the sidewalk. A cyclist swerved around me, hurling a loud Manhattan-style insult. I didn't hear him. I opened the email. Dear Ms. Townsend, we are pleased to inform you that you have been selected as a Whitfield Scholar for the class of 2025. I read it 3 times, then a 4th, my vision pixelating with every word. Then I sat down on the curb and cried. Not quiet, calculated tears. Ugly, heaving sobs that made the morning commuters swerve around me like I was a glitch in the sidewalk. 3 years of exhaustion, loneliness, and the relentless push to stay online poured out of me, right there under the shadows of the skyscrapers. I was a Whitfield Scholar. Full tuition, $10,000 a year for living expenses, and the right to transfer to any partner university in their network to finalize my degree. That night, Dr. Eris called me personally. Jules, I just got the notification. I'm so proud of you, though your logic was always too robust to fail. Everything, ma'am. I couldn't have. There's something else, she said, her voice shifting into a strategic whisper. The Whitfield allows you to transfer to a partner school for your final year. Whittier Tech is on the list. Whittier? Sienna's school. The place Caleb was currently dumping $250,000 into. If you transfer, Dr. Aris continued, you'd graduate with their highest engineering honors, and the Whitfield Scholar traditionally delivers the commencement address. My breath caught in my lungs. Jules, you'd be valedictorian. You'd speak at graduation in front of everyone, including the industry's top recruiters. I thought about my parents. I thought about them sitting in the audience for Sienna's big day, completely unaware that the failed prototype was about to become the most valuable asset in the room. I'm not doing this for revenge, I said quietly, trying to stabilize my own ethics. I know, Dr. Aris replied. I'm doing it because Whittier has the better AI research lab for my career. I know that too. She paused, and I could hear the digital grin in her voice. But if they happen to see you outperform the entire system, that's just a bonus feature. I made my decision that night, and I told no one in my family. I executed the transfer in secret, migrated my life to a tiny, subsidized studio near the Whittier campus, and began my final year as a background process in my sister's world. 3 weeks into my final semester at Whittier Tech, it happened. I was in the library, 3rd floor, tucked into a corner workstation with my neural network textbooks, when I heard a voice that made my heart rate spike like a DDoS attack. Oh my God, Jules? I looked up. Sienna stood 3 feet away, a half-empty iced oat milk latte in her hand, mouth hanging open like an unhandled exception. How are you? She couldn't form a complete sentence. I closed my laptop calmly, my face as unreadable as a secure server. Hi, Sienna. You go here? Since when? Mom and Dad didn't say. Becca and Caleb don't know. She blinked, her perfectly groomed eyebrows knitting together. What do you mean they don't know? Exactly what I said. They don't know I'm here. Sienna set her coffee down, still staring at me like I'd just bypassed her firewall. But how? They're not paying for. How did you? I paid for it myself. Whittier accepted my transfer. I have a fellowship. The word hung between us like a high-voltage wire. Sienna's expression shifted. Confusion, disbelief, and something else. Something that looked almost like the realization that she was no longer the most valuable product in the room. Why didn't you tell anyone? I looked at her, my twin sister, the one who'd gotten every upgrade I'd been denied, the one who'd never asked, not once in 4 years, how I was surviving on instant ramen and 4 hours of sleep. Did you ever ask, Sienna? She opened her mouth, closed it, her gaze dropping to her expensive sneakers. I gathered my books. I need to get to the AI lab. Deep learning doesn't wait for family reunions. Jules, wait! She grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly tight. Do you hate us? The family? I looked at her hand on my sleeve. It was the same shade of spray tan she'd gotten in Tahoe. Then at her face. No, I said quietly. You can't hate a system you've already moved on from. I pulled my arm free and walked away, the sound of my boots echoing in the marble halls of a school they said I didn't have the bandwidth to attend. That night, my phone lit up with missed calls, like a server experiencing a massive, unhandled traffic spike. Becca, Caleb, and Sienna, the entire Townsend board, were pinging me simultaneously. I silenced them all, the vibration against my nightstand sounding like a persistent error log in a failing system. Whatever was coming, it would happen on my terms, not theirs. I wasn't the failed prototype from the Palo Alto living room anymore. I was a lean startup, but had just hit profitability and was ready for a hostile takeover. Sienna called them immediately. I know because she told me later, her voice glitching with the sheer shock of the discovery when everything was over. "Jules is here," Sienna had said, barely through the door of her high-tech, off-campus smart suite. "Jules is at Whittier Tech. She's been here since September." According to Sienna, the silence on the other end lasted a full 10 seconds, the kind of dead air you get when a long-range satellite link drops. Then Caleb's voice, sharp and incredulous, cut through. "That's impossible. She doesn't have the liquid capital." Whittier doesn't just grant access to public school transfers without a massive donor backing. She said scholarship, something called the Whitfield Fellowship. She's not fellowship grade, Sienna. There's no disruptive potential in her code. I'll handle this. Caleb called me the next morning, precisely at 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, like he was leading a mandatory stand-up meeting. It was the first time he dialed my number in 3 years. "Jules, we need to talk." "About what?" "Sienna says you're at Whittier. You migrated your education without telling us. You bypassed the family's strategic roadmap." "I didn't think you'd care. I was a legacy product you'd already sunsetted back in 2021. A pause, heavy with a hum of unsaid data. "Of course I care. You're my daughter." "Am I?" The words came out flat, not bitter, just factual, like a line of deprecated code in a legacy system. "You told me I wasn't worth the investment. Remember that?" Silence. "Jules, that was 4 years ago. The market was different. We had to prioritize resources for the high-growth assets. You said I wasn't a disruptor, that there was no ROI with me. You told me to be resourceful. Well, Caleb, this is what a self-funded bootstrap launch looks like." "I don't remember saying." "I do." More silence, then. "We should discuss this in person at graduation. We're coming for Sienna's ceremony. And I know you. No, I'll see you there, Jules." I hung up. He didn't call back. That night, I sat in my small apartment, the one I'd paid for myself, with the Whitfield stipend and the equity I'd earned at CloudSync, and thought about that conversation. He didn't remember, or he selectively chose not to remember. Either way, he'd never actually seen me. Not really. But in 3 months, he would. And when that moment came, it wouldn't be because I forced him to look. It would be because the entire tech industry was looking, and he'd have no choice but to recognize the signal through the noise. The weeks before graduation became a strange kind of quiet, the calm before a global product launch. I knew they were coming. Caleb, Becca, Sienna, the whole perfect Townsend brand descending on campus to celebrate Sienna's milestone. They'd booked a high-end tech hotel with biohacking amenities, planned a lavish dinner at a restaurant where the tasting menu cost more than my first server rack, and ordered a massive, bioengineered bouquet of flowers for her. They still didn't know the full picture. Sienna had told them I was at Whittier, but she didn't know about the Whitfield Scholar status. She didn't know about the Valedictorian honor. She didn't know I'd been asked to deliver the commencement address. Dr. Aris called to check in. She'd made the trip all the way from the Hudson State campus, just to watch. "Do you want me to notify your family about the speech?" "No," I replied. I want them to hear it when everyone else does." She was quiet for a moment, her analytical tone softening just a fraction for the first time. "This isn't about making them feel bad, is it?" "No," I said honestly. "It's about telling my truth. If their reality can't handle the data of my success, that's a system error they'll have to debug themselves." Zephyr drove up for the ceremony, her electric car humming with pride. She helped me pick out a dress, the first new piece of clothing I'd bought in 2 years that wasn't a thrift store find. Matte black, structured, with a minimalist design that felt like high-performance armor. "You look like a founder about to announce $1 trillion IPO," she said. "I feel like my CPU is about to overheat," I admitted. "Same thing, probably. The nerves are just the system preparing for a peak load event." The night before graduation, I couldn't sleep. Not from nerves, not exactly. I kept wondering, what would I feel when I saw them? Would the old pain come rushing back like a persistent virus? Would I want them to hurt the way I'd hurt when I was sleeping in that cramped server room? I stared at the ceiling until 3 a.m., searching for answers in the logs of my memory. What I found surprised me. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want them to suffer in some analog, dramatic way. I just wanted to be free. And tomorrow, one way or another, the permissions they held over my self-worth would finally be revoked. Hey, I want to pause here for a second. If you've ever been underestimated by your own family, if you know what it feels like to work 10 times as hard for half the recognition, type upgrade in the comments. I want to know how many of us have rewritten our own source code. And if you're enjoying Jules' journey to the podium, hit that like button. It really helps the algorithm find other bad investments who are currently bootstrapping their own dreams. Now, back to graduation morning, May 17th. Bright sun, a blinding perfect blue sky, the kind of weather that felt almost ironic given the massive disruption I was about to deploy. Whittier Tech Stadium seated 3,000. By 9 a.m., it was nearly full. Families pouring through the gates, custom-printed flowers and branded balloons everywhere. The hum of excited conversation filling the air like white noise from 1,000 different radio stations. I arrived early, slipping in through the faculty entrance, where Dr. Aris gave me a sharp, approving nod. My regalia was different from the other graduates. Standard black gown, yes, but across my shoulders lay the heavy gold sash of Valedictorian. Pinned to my chest was the Whitfield Scholar Medallion, its bronze surface catching the morning light like a high-end heatsink. I took my seat in the VIP section at the front of the stage area, reserved for honors students, for speakers. 20 feet away, in the general graduate section, Sienna was taking selfies with her friends, her smile perfectly filtered and hollow. She hadn't seen me yet. And in the front row of the audience, dead center, best seats in the house, secured through Caleb's high-tier donor status, sat my parents. Caleb wore his signature tech mogul suit, the one he saved for Series C funding rounds and board takeovers. Becca had on a cream-colored dress, a massive bouquet of roses in her lap that looked like it cost more than a high-end AI workstation. Between them sat an empty chair, probably reserved for coats and expensive purses. Not for me. Never for the daughter who didn't fit the family brand. Caleb was fiddling with his professional-grade camera, adjusting settings, preparing to capture Sienna's big moment. Becca was smiling, waving at someone across the aisle, her smart jewelry flashing in the sun. They looked so happy, so proud. They had no idea that the investment they abandoned was about to become the most valuable signal in the room. The university president approached the podium. The crowd hushed. "Ladies and gentlemen, Welcome to Whittier Tech's Class of 2025 commencement ceremony. I sat perfectly still, my hands folded over the speech I'd coded in the silence of my studio. In a few minutes, they would call my name, and everything would change. I looked once more at my parents, at their expectant faces, their cameras ready for Sienna's shining moment. Soon, I thought. Soon you'll finally see the actual output. And for the first time, you won't be the ones holding the admin privileges. The ceremony proceeded in waves. Welcome address, acknowledgments, honorary degrees. The usual high-fidelity pageantry that stretches time like an agonizingly slow software update. Then the university president returned to the podium, his expression sharpening into the look of a man about to announce a market-shifting breakthrough. And now, it is my great honor to introduce this year's Valedictorian and Whitfield Fellow. I felt my heart rate spike, a rhythmic data pulse against my chest that felt like a system alert. A student who has demonstrated extraordinary resilience, academic excellence, and the kind of disruptive vision that will redefine the future of this industry. In the audience, Becca leaned over to something to Caleb. He nodded, adjusting his $10,000 camera lens, his focus locked firmly on Sienna's row, waiting for a moment that his internal algorithm didn't realize was already obsolete. Please join me in welcoming Jules Townsend. For one suspended moment, nothing happened. The bandwidth of the entire stadium seemed to drop to zero. Then I stood. 3,000 pairs of eyes turned toward me. I walked toward the podium, my matte black heels clicking against the stage floor with the cold precision of a ticking clock, the gold sash swaying with each step. The Whitfield medallion gleamed against my chest, reflecting the California sun like a high-performance heatsink. And in the front row, I watched my parents' faces transform in high definition. Caleb's hand froze on his camera shutter. Becca's bouquet slipped sideways, dropping bioengineered petals onto the turf. Confusion first. Who is that? Then recognition. Wait, is that? Then shock. The system can't handle this. Then nothing but a pale, stricken silence that felt like a total server crash. Sienna's head snapped toward the stage, her eyes wide as she nearly dropped her smart bottle. I saw her mouth my name. Jules. I reached the podium, adjusted the microphone with steady, calibrated fingers, and looked out. 3,000 people applauded. My parents didn't. They just sat there frozen, as if someone had executed a hard reset on their entire reality. For the first time in my life, they were looking at me. Really looking. Not at Sienna, not through me, at me. I let the applause fade until the only sound was the cooling fans of the stadium's broadcast equipment. Then I leaned into the microphone. Good morning, everyone. My voice was steady, a clean signal cutting through the static. 4 years ago, I was told I wasn't worth the investment. In the front row, Becca's hand flew to her mouth. Caleb's camera hung useless at his side, dangling like a piece of legacy hardware. I was told I didn't have what it takes. I was told to expect a limited career because others saw no scalability in my potential. 3,000 people sat in perfect silence, the stadium feeling like a pressurized vacuum. So, I learned to build my own architecture. I spoke about the 3 jobs, the 4 hours of sleep, the bulk order ramen dinners, and the secondhand textbooks with other people's Neuralink notes in the margins. I spoke about what it meant to build something from nothing, not because you wanted to prove anyone wrong, but because you needed to prove your own source code was viable. The greatest gift I received wasn't financial support or a Series A funding, I said, my gaze briefly locking with Caleb's, which was now filled with a desperate kind of recognition. It was the chance to discover who I am without a corporate safety net. In the front row, Becca was crying. Not the proud, joyful tears of a graduation ceremony, but something unfiltered and raw. The look of a user who realized they deleted the most valuable file in their system. Caleb sat motionless, staring at the podium like he was seeing a stranger. Maybe he was. To anyone who has ever been told, "You're not enough," I paused, letting the words settle over the crowd like a network-wide update. You are. You always have been. Your value isn't determined by those who lack the bandwidth to see it. I looked out at the sea of faces, at the other graduates who'd struggled, at the faculty who'd believed, at Zephyr who was standing on her chair, and yes, at my own family sitting there like glitched NPCs. I am not here because someone believed in me. I am here because I learned to reprogram my own destiny. The applause that followed was thunderous, a standing ovation that vibrated through the steel deck of the stadium. People rose to their feet, 3,000 industry leaders and peers cheering for a girl who had been categorized as a bad investment. I stepped back from the podium, and as I descended the stage, I saw James Whitfield III waiting at the bottom, with the respect he usually reserved for Fortune 500 CEOs. The reception area buzzed with champagne and high-level congratulations. I was shaking hands with the dean when I saw them approaching, moving through the crowd with the slow, awkward latency of people who knew they were out of place. Caleb reached me first. "Jules." His voice was hoarse, lacking the sharp venture capital authority it usually carried. "Why didn't you tell us?" I accepted a glass of sparkling water from a passing server, took a sip, the cold clarity of it matching my internal state. "Did you ever ask?" He opened his mouth, closed it, his internal logic gate failing to find an exit. Becca arrived beside him, mascara streaked down her biohacked cheeks. "Baby, I'm so sorry. We didn't know." "You knew." I kept my voice even. "You ran the numbers, and you chose to ignore the output." "That's not fair," Caleb started, trying to find a way to reframe the narrative. "Fair?" The word came out calm, not sharp. "You told me I wasn't worth investing in. You spent $250,000 on Sienna's brand and told me to bootstrap my life. That's exactly what I did." Becca reached for me. I stepped back, maintaining the firewall I'd spent 4 years hardening. "Jules, please." "I'm not angry," I said, and I meant it. The anger had burned away years ago, replaced by something cleaner, the efficient coldness of a self-made woman. "But I'm not the same product that you sunsetted 4 years ago." Caleb's jaw tightened. "I made a mistake. I miscalculated your potential." "You saw what you wanted to see." I met his eyes. "You were right about one thing, though. I wasn't worth the investment. Not to you. But I was worth every single line of code I wrote for myself." He flinched like I'd struck him. James Whitfield III appeared at my elbow, extending his hand. "Miss Townsend, brilliant speech. The Foundation is proud to have you on our board for the upcoming AI Summit." I shook his hand while my parents watched, seeing one of the most powerful men in tech treating their unprofitable daughter like a visionary. I turned back to my parents. They looked smaller somehow, overshadowed by the very success they hadn't predicted. "I'm not going to pretend everything's fine," I said, "because it's not." "Can we just talk as a family?" Becca whispered. "We are talking. But I have a career waiting in New York City. I start in 2 weeks. I won't be coming home to Palo Alto. Caleb stepped forward. You're cutting us off just like that? I'm setting permissions, Caleb. There's a difference. What do you want from us? His voice cracked, the sound of a man who realized his influence had reached its expiration date. I considered the question. I don't want anything from you anymore. That's the point. I took a breath. But if you want to talk, really talk, you can call me. I might answer. I might not. It depends on whether you're calling to apologize or just trying to fix your own public image. Sienna appeared at the edge of our circle, looking small in her expensive graduation gown. Jules, she hesitated. Congratulations. You're actually incredible. Thank you. No hug, no tearful reconciliation, but no cruelty either. I'll call you sometime, I told her. She nodded, eyes wet. I'd like that. I turned and walked away, not running, just moving forward toward the global launch of the life I had engineered. Dr. Eris was waiting by the exit. You did well, she said. The system is live, I replied. And for the first time in my life, I'm the admin. 2 months later, I stood in my new apartment in Manhattan. It was a studio, really. One window overlooking a brick wall in Hell's Kitchen. But it was mine. I'd signed the lease with money from my first paycheck at Morrison & Associates, a top financial consulting firm, where I was hired for my ability to analyze the very ROI Caleb thought I lacked. Becca's letter arrived a week later. She wrote about regret, about seeing me on that stage and realizing she'd been looking at a shadow while the sun was rising. I see you now, she wrote. I put the letter in my desk drawer and didn't reply. Not yet. For the first time, I was the one controlling the latency. I used to think love was something you earned, that if I was smart enough, my parents would finally greenlight me. 4 years taught me that you can't earn what should have been an open-source gift. My parents' rejection didn't break me. It rebuilt me into a system that no longer required their validation. The girl who sat in that living room 4 years ago, desperate for Caleb's approval, she's been overwritten. In her place is a woman who knows exactly what she's worth, down to the last decimal point. Last month, I wrote a check to the Hudson State Technology Fund. $10,000, anonymous, for students without family backing. Zephyr cried when I told her, Jules, you're changing a life. I'm just providing the initial funding, I said, thinking of Dr. Eris. If you're watching this and you've been overlooked or told you weren't good enough, hear this. They were wrong. Your worth isn't a metric on their dashboard. Your worth exists whether they acknowledge it or not. I spent 18 years waiting for them to notice me. I spent 4 more proving I didn't need them to. And you know what? The view from the top of the mountain I climbed myself is clearer than any view they could have bought me. Thank you for staying until the end. If this story meant something to you, share it with another failed prototype who needs to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe. There are more stories of high-stakes resilience waiting in the description below.